Welcome to Starknet Espresso, your weekly shot of high signal insights from the Starknet ecosystem. I'm your host, Uche, and today's episode is something truly special. We are diving deep into Bitcoin's next chapter, not just as a store of value, but a scalable, programmable infrastructure. This is our Bitcoin special edition, featuring some of the brightest minds pushing the boundaries of what we can do with Bitcoin on Starknet. Joining us today is Jan from Xverse, Nils from Vesu, Matteo from Pragma Oracle, Antoine from Argent, and David Barreto from Starknet Foundation. Stay tuned.
Welcome everybody to Starknet Espresso once again. It's such a pleasure to have everybody back on the show again.
Yeah, good to be back.
Hey,
Hi,
thanks for
Uche.
having me.
Yeah, good. So I just want us to get into things immediately, but before we start things, I would like us to go around and introduce ourselves and then we kick it off from there. I'm Uche, host of Starknet Espresso and a smart contract developer here. Nils, maybe you
Yeah,
go.
I can go. I don't know. I can go next. I'm David Barreto. I'm a developer advocate at the Starknet Foundation.
Yeah, Nils.
I'm Nils. I'm building Vesu lending market on Starknet.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Jan. I'm from Xverse. You guys probably know Xverse as the Bitcoin wallet. And we are in the process of integrating Starknet. So we're expanding into the Bitcoin L2. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, Antoine.
And I'm Antoine, ecosystem lead at Argent.
Yeah, Matteo.
Hey, Matteo here. I'm the co-founder of Pragma, the Starknet Oracle. I've already been on the show, so I guess people kind of already know.
Yeah, sure. So welcome everybody once again. Basically, I wanted us to hold this for Bitcoin special because of what has been happening in the ecosystem recently. David, I don't know if you remember, but last year, towards the ending of our episode, you mentioned that Starknet was going to be scaling Bitcoin. That was one of the last things we discussed during that episode. So I guess it makes sense to start with asking how far has that progressed so far on Starknet, the vision to make Bitcoin programmable and have DeFi on Bitcoin. How's it gone so far?
Oh yeah. So the Bitcoin integration, we have let's say multiple paths to make it happen. Obviously, what we have right now is what any other layer 2 will have, is basically multi-sigs to bridge some version of a wrapped Bitcoin into Starknet, which has, I mean, it's usable, it's practical, it has a lot of downside of terms of security and availability as well. The long-term plan is to have something that is more robust. And the idea is that not only to have this a trustless bridge, so we can finally have real Bitcoin on a Starknet that doesn't depend on anyone, it's completely trustless, but also to allow to secure Starknet with Bitcoin alongside with Ethereum. So you will have now Starknet being secured by a proof of stake, the biggest and most decentralized proof of stake network on Ethereum, and the biggest and more powerful proof of work network in Bitcoin. And to get there are different ways, right? Like the ideal way will be to, if one day OPCAT gets re-enabled in the protocol, we know that we can use that to verify a Stark proof directly on chain on Bitcoin using Bitcoin script. But there's a challenge that you need to add this opcode, so it will take a long time basically to get to consensus of the community to actually re-enable this opcode. So it's not going to happen soon. The second option that Starkware is exploring is to using BitVM to use essentially the same thing to verify a Stark proof. In this case, will be like an off-chain verification with some kind of fraud proof and challenge that happens on-chain on Bitcoin, which has pros and cons. Like you have this verification of a proof, but now you have this fraud proof that takes like a week of challenge. So the finality is much longer, and there's a limit of how much money you can move between in the bridge in a trustless way. Then the other area of research, and by the way, BVM is not yet fully deployed, right? You cannot use it right now. We hope that by the end of this year, maybe BitVM becomes available on Bitcoin, so we can start actually doing implementation. The second or the third way we're thinking about that, or Starknet thinking about that, is using a new research that Starknet is doing that's called Collider VM. And this is essentially having a new type of virtual machine directly on Bitcoin using some taproot scripts magic that would allow us to also verify a Stark proof on chain. It wouldn't be as good in the sense that it wouldn't be as native as using OPCAT directly, but it will be the closest you can get to a complete trustless verification and then done on chain as well. It's just with OPCAT, it's like a more native version of it. So it all depends, right? If OPCAT becomes available tomorrow, then that's the path we take, and we forget about the rest. But if not, okay, so what's the alternative? So if BitBM is the first one to become available, probably that's the first one we're gonna use to implement this integration. And if OPCAT takes too long and the research for ClariVM continues progressing well, maybe that will be like the next iteration. Like let's implement that with ClariVM. And then with the hope that eventually OPCAT is enabled and we can just move the whole thing just to use OPCAT and just doing everything as native as possible with Bitcoin script. So probably it will happen in stages.
Oh, great, great. I think Collider VM has been demoed. Am I right?
Like the paper has been published for anyone to review. I don't know if we have an implementation showing how the validity proof will be verified on chain. I don't think that exists yet, but I might be wrong. I know about the paper for sure.
Oh, great, great. Back to you, Jan. One of the conversations we had during our session was the idea that OPCAT will be voted on, or if it doesn't get voted on, we'll have an idea of where the Bitcoin community sentiment lies in. Do we have that sentiment in regards to what would you say, their inclination towards activating OPCAT?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. However, I think we have made a significant amount of progress, right? And I think that's what's important. I don't think we're at the stage of what David mentioned. Like, I don't think OPCAT is happening tomorrow. That's for sure. However, if I compare it to maybe 1.5 years ago, when we really started to have this conversation regularly in the Bitcoin ecosystem, I think since then we have made a significant amount of progress, right? Because when we started, everybody was just laughing and everybody was just like, no, this will never happen. The Bitcoin core devs are going to hate everything about it because it was quote unquote proposed by the Taproot wizards, right? And they're just JPEGs guys. And so that was really kind of the sentiment at the very beginning. But since then, obviously, you can see that the conversation around soft fork in general, again, be it OPCAT or be it CTV or be it whatever else that is being currently discussed, just the conversation around it has progressed. Now you have conferences like twice, 3 times a year, people gather, like the Bitcoin core devs and some of the most important companies in that conversation, they gather and they discuss these things openly, right? And then when you look at Twitter and X, you see basically people that used to be very, very against it. They are now basically getting behind specific proposals. And they're like, hey, I prefer this one because A, B, C, D, E, F, G. No, I prefer the other one because of the A, B, C, D, E, F, G reasons, right? And so I think to me, that's a significant amount of progress. I cannot really say like, is it going to happen in 6 months from now? I mean, I remember conversation with Jeremy Rubin, which, who you guys know very well. And I remember having conversation with him maybe 3 months ago. When was that? In Denver, right? And he was saying that like, yeah, if we get our shit together, we could actually even make potentially something happen this year. But I don't think that that's going to be happening because we still have a lot of work to do in those discussions, I would say. So, maybe I think more realistic would be that we're gonna make significant amount of progress even further this year, and then next year I think it could be on the table. But again, is it gonna be OPCAT? Is it gonna be OpCTV? Is it gonna be a combination of both? Is it gonna be something else? That's really hard to tell because those things are still being discussed, right? But I think what we can do as a collective, which you guys and us, we have been doing this for a very long time, is we just want to contribute to the conversation. We want to encourage people to educate themselves. We want to encourage the conversation to happen. We're not like saying that, the only thing is OPCAT and nothing else like doesn't exist or we don't want it. No, like, we're just encouraging conversation overall. And I think I told you this last time, like, soft fork is going to happen on Bitcoin sooner or later. Like it's just like guaranteed because soft fork has happened before. We need to keep upgrading this great piece of technology because otherwise it's just going to become outdated at some point, and we don't want that. And so it's 100% happening. It's just like, okay, is it going to be in the next 6 months or the next 12 months or 18? That's the question, which I don't know how to answer.
Oh, great, great. Well, one thing is certain, if this eventually happens, we are going to have the $2 trillion in Bitcoin market cap pour into the ecosystem one way or the other. And I think this is where Nils comes in. What opportunities do you see this bringing into the DeFi sphere?
Yeah, I actually think of the opportunities that it brings to people owning Bitcoin at the moment, right? I mean, if you look at Bitcoin, as you mentioned, right, it's by far the largest crypto market, right, with 2 trillion and more. It has the broadest adoption by far in terms of people actually owning crypto. If you ask someone on the street, they would know Bitcoin. They would kind of almost make Bitcoin equals crypto, right? That's kind of from their perspective what crypto is, right? If you look at all the banks, even like, so I'm in Switzerland here, small regional banks starting to actually offering Bitcoin accounts, right? Which is crazy if you think about that. But so that's all just to say it's the biggest, most respected crypto asset by far. And yet at the same time, most of Bitcoin is locked away at the moment, right? So it's in cold storage, it's with, you know, a centralized exchange maybe, or whatever, right? So people own Bitcoin at the moment, but they're not really using it, right? It almost sounds like gold, right? It's difficult to move gold around. It's difficult to use it in your everyday life. So Bitcoin is actually much better than gold. It's digital, right? And we can move it around the world in seconds. And we can actually send it anywhere, anytime, you know, whatever hour of the day. We can use it as collateral to borrow, to access liquidity. Bitcoin is much better than gold. And so what we want to really look at is the opportunity to start using Bitcoin, right? And to be able to use Bitcoin, this is where we need a different layer. We need programmability. We need L2s. And Starknet is one of those contesters to actually attract you know, a lot of the activity. And I think, you know, even when we say using Bitcoin, it starts with the very basic things. To be able to own and hold Bitcoin in my everyday life, we need good and secure wallets, right? And so this is why Xverse here, Argent is here, right? So just holding it in a secure manner, in a user-friendly manner, that's kind of the first challenge, right? And we, even on that, you know, in that sense, we have made huge progress in terms of, again, the security and the user-friendliness. And so then come all the next things, you know, now I can use it safely. I want to spend it kind of on a daily basis. We have, you know, the card, Antoine, right? And we want to take a loan against my Bitcoin because I don't want to sell my Bitcoin. I shouldn't sell my Bitcoin, right? Or like Sailor says, you know, sell your teeth, sell your liver, whatever, but keep hold your Bitcoin, right? So I'd rather take a loan. And so this is where kind of the opportunities for an ecosystem like Starknet, like us, come in to actually enable people, Bitcoin holders, to start using their Bitcoin and not just lock it away.
Yeah, I think it's one thing is certain, there's great opportunity that lies ahead for Bitcoin holders. And I think one thing again, Matteo, this is for you. Pragma is at the core of this. Like whatever we're going to do with Bitcoin is dependent on correct pricing on the Oracle. So Matteo, but beyond DeFi, because you have a broader view of what goes on within the ecosystem, what other opportunities do you think lies for Bitcoiners as we open this landscape?
Yeah, I don't want to deceive you, but I think like DeFi is the main use case for Bitcoin on Starknet and for Bitcoin as a whole. I think crypto is mostly DeFi, even though there's like many experiments outside of this, but the main use case of crypto is still DeFi, and that's what we are really excited about, and that's really what we're looking forward with Bitcoin on Starknet. So. Obviously, there's a lot of different flavors of Bitcoin on Starknet with like Wrap BTC, Lombard BTC coming, and I guess like a few others that are going to come. So it's always a different way to price them because it's different trust assumptions. It's also different liquidity levels on Starknet. But yeah, like generally, I think lending is like a killer use case for Bitcoin, as Nils said before. I want to borrow against my Bitcoin. I also want to get yield from my Bitcoin. So that's like the two sides of the market right here. And if we can have Bitcoin as a trustless asset on Starknet and not a wrap version as we have today, I think it just remove the barrier for a lot of holders that didn't want to put their bitcoins to use because of trust assumptions. And so, if we can say you have self-custody now, and you can directly use the battle-tested products of Starknet, it's just like a great thing to do. And so that's really what we're looking forward to. And I think it's like a benefit for both ecosystems, right? For Bitcoin on one end to have these kind of products and access products, non-custodial products, and on the other end for Starknet to attract liquidity and to attract users and all this user base that we join. So it's like a win-win, win-win here.
Yeah,
I would say that
sure.
another big use case besides DeFi for Bitcoin is payments. Because I think once we have a trustless bridge, Starknet, given that it's so cheap, like a sub-cent transaction gas, we could be a better alternative to the Lightning network, in my opinion. A way more trustless, at least, because a lot of the Lightning wallets are ended up being custodial in a way because of the challenge of balancing channels correctly.
Yeah, true. And I think this opens up the way for Argent. I mean, Argent has the G Metal currently, which enables payment across most of EU nations currently. So, and again, I think it's facilitated by Argent's user UX experience, because I think account abstraction is one of the things that made Starknet quite unique, which is why I'm going to delve into this part next. We're talking about Bitcoin and we want to get more people into the ecosystem to use this magnificent technology. Now, I know for sure that with account abstraction, things has been easy to getting users onboarded on the ecosystem. Antoine, what is Argent doing to even extend or simplify access to BTC users?
Yeah, so I'd say probably when it comes down to this, there is two types of users. So on the one hand, people who already own Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. And so there probably the challenge will be to convince these people that they can safely bridge their assets to Starknet to basically earn yield on them, use them for payment, just give them some utility, right? So some of the work is done at the chain level. We have been discussing this before. Indeed, now to date, all Bitcoin L2s use these, multi-sig bridges, which are not really secure. Very soon, it's moving to BitVM, and then Starknet has this, extended roadmap to basically have some kind of trust minimize or even better trustless way to bridge Bitcoin. So once people are convinced to do this, then we need to provide them with a great experience and show them that Starknet is a great place to use, right? So just to give an example, if I am a Bitcoin holder on Bitcoin and then I decide to bridge my BTC to Starknet, and why not supply it in Vesu because I want to borrow USDC that I can then use and spend it with the Argent card, let's say. I probably won't have at any point Stark or ETH tokens in my wallet to pay for gas fees, right? And so something that account abstraction and smart accounts unlock is the ability to just get rid of this gas. So we can sponsor transaction, or we can just let people pay with the Bitcoin WBTC, LBTC maybe soon, BitVM powered BTC tokens that they have breached. And so that means they don't need to interact with any other kind of assets, any other kinds of primitives. They know Bitcoin, they come to Starknet, they just need to know Bitcoin and they can use their Bitcoin on Starknet. So that's one thing. And then I think also what is very important is what Nils said, that Bitcoin is the crypto asset that is has the most mind share. It is starting to get broad adoption, right? So countries are starting to pilot Bitcoin, companies, private and public. There is ETFs, all this. So basically now crypto means Bitcoin, Bitcoin means crypto for most people, right? And so I think we are also entering a period where people who used to invest because they want to hedge against inflation, so they used to invest in bonds, in stocks, in ETFs, and more they will want to invest into Bitcoin. And maybe those people, they have no clue how to actually do this on the Bitcoin network. It's a bit complex. You have a seed phrase and everything. And so what we want to do also to be at Argent is kind of an entry point for these people. And that is also possible thanks to account abstraction. We can get rid of seed phrases, as I said. We don't need to care about gas anymore. We can have account recovery. And I mean, it's always been this vision that we have at Argent that we want to build something that is basically feels like it's like your neobank or your fintech that you use on a daily basis, but it's actually self-custodial. And so this is also like the vision we have, yes.
Yeah, great. So this also goes to Xverse. I know Xverse for now we can bridge Starknet and Bitcoin on Xverse. Jan, are you looking to further integrate Bitcoin on Xverse into deeper protocols on Starknet, like or lending protocols where this can be done directly from your platform?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for us, we obviously support Bitcoin L1 already. So if you look at all the Bitcoin native applications, they have already integrated with Xverse just because we're kind of the pioneers and we have been building in the space since day one. And we're working on the Starknet integration, and that's going to happen in the next few weeks, and then other iterations are gonna come later. And obviously, yes, like we want to offer basically all these use cases, right? Like I think our vision is really building an entire platform that basically serves all the Bitcoin users, right? So, I mean, I love Michael Saylor, what he's doing. I have some skin in the game there. Bitcoin Treasury is really interesting and exciting, and he is probably never gonna sell the Bitcoin unless they, I guess change, the mandate, and whatever. But like he basically just wants to like buy Bitcoin, hold it, store it, and then build some instruments around it, right? And I think that's one way to utilize it, right? Because you look at it as like, as he says, the best asset in the world, right? And so that's one use case for Bitcoin. And I think that's totally fine. Like, let's say if everybody does that, if suddenly like billions and even trillions of dollars at some point in the future are going to wake up and going to do the same thing. Who knows like what percentage of the supply is going to be locked in 3 trillion, but it's going to be significantly higher than that. And so even then we still have, let's say, I don't know, 20, 30, 50% left for the DeFi stuff, and for everything else, we're talking about enormous amount of value, right? And so, what we really want to do, we want to serve every single use case. And I think some of the use cases are going to come through the L1. Some of the use cases are going to come through L2s like Starknet. And, I am personally a very big fan of, I want to have as much Bitcoin as I can. But at the same time, like, you want to live life and you want to turn it into a productive asset, right? You don't necessarily want to just like hodl it, do nothing, and just kind of like, okay, it's going to appreciate in value. But if it appreciates in value, you can turn it into productive assets. You can borrow against it. You can take some leverage. You can figure out ways how to actually accumulate even more Bitcoin, right? And so that's what I want to do. So, I'm not interested in just like buying Bitcoin and put it on my ledger, Trezor, whatever, and like never touch it ever again, and maybe just give it to my kids, and maybe they can figure out what they're gonna do, right? Like there could be some portion of it that I'm gonna do it with, but the rest, like I just want to figure out how I can turn it into an asset that can work for me. And I think the problem today is that we don't really have tools that are trustless, that are, in a way that people can actually rely on them, right? Because we have seen a lot of the crazy situations with the centralized exchanges, with these kind of CeFi products that claim to be kind of decentralized, but they never were, and they all collapse, right? And so obviously people just don't trust in solutions like this, and they're just looking for better alternative. And so like ideally we get Opcat, we get something that will allow us to do really, really the right way. But before that, I think we just need to come up with solutions that are good enough, and we need to kind of pave the way for people to see the potential, and that is going to unlock the potentially further conversations around upgrades and stuff like that. So that's really the world that I think we're going to be living in a few years from now. Like, I think it's pretty much guaranteed, because I've talked to a lot of Bitcoin maxis that are even my friends, and even them are thinking about ways, how can I borrow against this thing? And, there are some companies in Europe that I've talked to that are, they're very rich people because they have been in Bitcoin since very, very beginning, and they never sold. But themselves, they're building solutions like allowing people to just borrow fiat or borrow stable coins against their Bitcoin, because now like we're very wealthy in the Bitcoin terms, but like maybe we want to do something else, So I think it's pretty much guaranteed that we're going into the world where people are going to be not only storing Bitcoin forever like Michael Saylor, but actually they will want to turn it into a productive asset.
Yeah. I want to point to the fact that Xverse has the biggest Bitcoin wallet right now, and Argent also. I think 7 out of.
Well, depends. I think it really depends, like how you look at a Bitcoin wallet, right? Because if you just consider Bitcoin wallet any kind of Bitcoin or any kind of wallet that just holds Bitcoin, then obviously we are not the biggest, right? Because there's many other companies that are hardware wallets like Ledger. That probably have more users than us at this point. There are probably a lot of exchange wallets that have millions, tens of millions of users that are just holding some Bitcoin in their wallets, right? And so I wouldn't say that we're biggest Bitcoin wallet, period. But if you look at the use case of Bitcoin Web3 and Bitcoin DeFi and Bitcoin as an asset that again should be productive, and you should be able to have options to connect to different applications and buy some NFTs, speculate on things, or like maybe get into some stable coins, maybe get into some like yielding products and stuff like that. So for that specific market, we're the biggest because nobody was really focusing on this, right? Like 4 years ago, everybody thought that we're lunatics when we were pitching the idea of Bitcoin Web3 4 years ago. And so, luckily we're still around. We survived those periods of times, and now we have proven people wrong, and we just have to keep growing from there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Over 1 million download, that's not a small feat. So, I mean, I give it to you guys. Also, Argent controls about 70% of wallets on Starknet. So the big question is, are we going to be seeing any synergy between the both of you very soon?
I mean, there might be. I don't think there is any active collaboration at the moment. I think it's more of a common effort to try to give utility to Bitcoin and do this on Starknet.
Yeah, I mean, we are open. Our mindset has always been, because we grew up in the Bitcoin world, right? Which, let's be frank, but like if you look at Bitcoin ecosystem 4 years ago, there wasn't really much happening. It wasn't even that friendly of a place, because Bitcoin maxis were kind of trying to gatekeep everything. And when we tried to do something novel, they would just hate on you all day long and tell you how big of a scammer you are, and stuff like that. So, we grew up in a pretty rough environment, and we have always had the opposite mindset. Like we want to make sure that we can just keep on growing this space, right? And, at the end of the day, like, let's be real here, right? Like maybe right now the space is still relatively small, but again, if we're right, which, I am betting my everything on the fact that we are right, that Bitcoin ecosystem is the future, the Bitcoin fine is the future, that every single major company that is serious about doing anything on chain, they will want to settle back to Bitcoin because it's the most decentralized, most secure chain out there, and nobody can even compete. Like it's just fact. And so like I'm betting my everything that we are right about this. And if we're right, we're talking about trillions and tens of trillions of dollars of value in the future. And that market is so vast and so huge that there is going to be room for many different players. And every player is going to have a different approach. Somebody will want to focus on I don't know, payments, credit cards, whatever else it is, right? Like, and other people are going to focus on other things. And so I think we're always open to collaboration, and I think we have discussed with Argent specifically a couple of things. We don't have anything ongoing right now just because we're not, I would say, even quite ready for that yet. But if there is going to be something we can do to grow the pie and bring a couple more million people to Bitcoin or to Bitcoin layers, like, of course, like, let's do it.
Oh, great.
I just also think it's very important to actually have different wallets, just like other kind of crypto infrastructure, right? Having competition on one hand is healthy, right? But also just 100%. From a kind of security perspective to have like a choice between different wallets. And, if on one end something's failing, there is something else. So I just think it's very, very healthy for an ecosystem to have diversity in wallets and other parts of the infra.
Yeah, like I've always been, a big fan of seeing other wallets coming to Bitcoin, even though a lot of people were telling me, oh, what are you guys going to do if Phantom comes here and does something? And I'm like, hey, of course, like, yeah, it's a competition, and, we have to stay sharp. We have to keep on executing, right? Like, we have to make sure that we have the best product or better product if we want to compete, right? But at the end of the day, I would probably not want to be in a market that nobody cares about, right? I think if we're in a market that nobody wants to come to because it's too small or it's whatever, then we're probably in the wrong market, right? And we're gonna fail eventually in the next few years. So I'm very excited every time I see somebody announcing support for Bitcoin or support for Bitcoin layers or whatever it is. Like, I think it's really good for the space. And, we just have to keep on trying, building things that people want to use. That's the most important thing.
Oh, great. David, most of what we've seen with regards to bridging Bitcoin has been reliant on multi-sig. Do you think that Collider VM is going to enable some trustless transactions to go on with? We know, of course, that Upcat is going to enable that, but what do you think about Collider VM?
Yeah, Collider VM it will be like the best alternative to Upcat. I would consider that with Trustless as well. For me, the main downside compared to Upcat is that it requires to have a VM on Bitcoin, which you can do, right? It was proven by Starknet that you can do it, but it doesn't feel as native as using Upcat using just Bitcoin script. But you will get essentially a trustless bridge. Not just the bridge, the ability to secure Starknet with Bitcoin, standard validity proof, the same way we do with Ethereum today. It's just Collider VM is still very early. It's just still in the research phase. It needs to go through an engineering phase of an implementation, a hardening. Like, take into account, like, when the Stark paper came out was 2018, and it was only 2020 when StarkX became a thing, right? The practical implementation of this technology. So these things need some time to mature and be, well thought of before they go into production. But yeah, it's a great alternative that doesn't require any soft fork. That is the main benefit, right? You don't need to wait for any consensus to happen.
Oh, great. I mean, this is what I think most people are waiting for, an infrastructure like this to be able to trust the whole system and getting their Bitcoin into use. Matteo, back to you. I believe Pragma is at the core of this, and for most of the existence, you've been dealing with supplying feeds to Starknet. Of course, we have this native oracle for Starknet, but now we're having Bitcoin coming. Are there any changes to your infrastructure that you're looking at?
So honestly, not much. It's just a question of assets, right? It's like which assets are being traded on Starknet, which assets are being supplied, used as collateral, what protocols are integrating in their as collateral or as asset in the system. So so far we have not seen a lot more assets than before. So we still have like Wrap BTC on Starknet, Lombard BTC, so ILBTC is coming. Other than that, I think it was the plan at some point to bring runes in. So a bunch of runes should be coming. So that's other kind of assets that we need to price. So it's like longer tail assets than Bitcoin, right? It's like it's less traded, less liquidity, and so it's like a different asset to price. But I think that generally it's mostly a question of asset, and I like Bitcoin is like the most traded one. So whatever comes onto Starknet, it's pretty straightforward for us to integrate. What I'm really excited about is to see what the different DeFi protocols on Starknet are going to do with those new assets. And so especially like Vesu with the lending part. Obviously, they already started with like the DeFi incentives with like the foundation for Wrap BTC. Actually, my mother is already supplying her Bitcoin on Vesu. So that's already some users onboarded. But other than that, I think we can onboard a lot of people through this kind of this kind of initiatives. And so it's really exciting to see this coming up.
Yeah, I think we discussed this part extensively in our last conversation, but just for the new audience, especially the Bitcoiners that are coming into the ecosystem, one of the things people worry about is centralization when it comes to Oracle. You know, we've seen a lot of that in the LT ecosystem in general. We know the Black Thursday of Chainlink. We know about a couple of that have happened. What are you doing to make sure we don't experience that also on Starknet? I know we've discussed this extensively, but just for the new audience.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So it's like there's like lots of moving parts into this. So there's like on the Oracle itself, and so how we price the assets. For this, we have like dozens of data providers that just send data to our network and so our smart contracts, and so it's very resilient whenever we price assets. So that's one part for the Oracle, and then there's all the integration work that we are doing with the different protocols. And so this is very key to security as well, because how like what kind of price feed you want to use for a specific asset? It's not like really straightforward, right? For BTC, you must. I think you should use a VWAP because it's very liquid. So it's a short tail asset. It's not a derivative, like high capitalization. But whenever you go to wrapped versions, it may differ because liquidity on Starknet is not the same. And so that's like all those questions of not only decentralization of the Oracle, but also like what kind of feed are you actually using for your protocol? For instance, if you're using a wrap version, maybe you should use something closer to like a conversion rate, and so to look actually at what are the assets backing the derivative, and not like the price of the derivative itself on the secondary exchanges. And so that's like all the work we are doing with Vesu, for instance, extended soon. So like the perpetual protocol coming to Starknet. And so, yeah, like there's like a wide range of things that we are doing to make sure that one, we're pricing the assets correctly, and so we have enough data providers and the data is of quality, and two, like the pricing itself, and so how protocols are pricing the assets.
If I can, just a shout out here also to Pragma and Matteo, the guys. I mean, it's really, I think, a game changer, some of the things that you can do with this type of Oracle, which, for instance, you cannot do with Chainlink. On the other hand, it's also good to see other Oracle providers being live on Starknet, including Chainlink. There again, kind of diversity, which is really important. But to come back to you guys, for instance, one thing that we were able to do with Vesu using Pragma is it's specifically this point of how many data sources do you guys actually use? How many data sources does an Oracle use to come up with a price, right? You can have, I don't know, 100 data providers who all push a price from the same source, having 100 providers doesn't make a big difference. But if we know how many sources are actually represented in kind of the sample of prices that we then aggregate, we can also implement fail safes, right? And that's something that that Vesu does. If, for instance, on some of kind of the blue chip assets, there is less than this number of sources, then kind of the market pauses until there is enough sources represented again. And those additional kind of fail safes, I think, are in particular very important with respect to also Bitcoin assets and more conservative or security kind of aware Bitcoin holders who want to be sure that, you know, their Bitcoin doesn't disappear. They're not liquidated because of an Oracle failure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is one of the things that I think you mentioned it in our last conversation with regards to oracles, and which is one thing I like about this, because I think security is one of the things that we've talked about in our conversation, and how, I mean, the oracle on Vesu is decentralized too, because we've talked of the option of using whichever oracle you like. Is that still going to be applied to assets on Bitcoin coming into Vesu?
Well, so what's really, let's say, decentralized is how you create lending markets, right? So someone comes in, sees a big opportunity with a new asset that can be a Bitcoin asset, a variant of Bitcoin. It can be runes. It can be other types of assets from the Bitcoin ecosystem. And they're just able to, first of all, create a new lending market for that asset without having to consult anyone else, right? Which is kind of the first point. And then what's important when someone or a team is deploying a new market is having diversity in terms of kind of the underlying infrastructure. And I think one important element there, yes, is oracles. So having a set of options to choose from with oracles, which offer robust feeds, is very important. And yes, that will also be available for Bitcoin assets. I mean, as much as the different oracles support the new assets that come onto Starknet. That's, of course, a precondition. It's always been very good and hands-on with the Pragma team. And yeah, we will see how other providers support new assets.
Yeah. David, Pragma has become the native oracle for Starknet, but you know we are moving into higher grounds now. We're looking at Bitcoin coming in as being the L2 for Bitcoin, and I envisage that other protocols will want to follow suit. Do you see Pragma becoming the native oracle for every other rollup that is going to want to scale Bitcoin?
I mean, the thing that I like about Pragma is that they really embrace this verifiable computation to create more complex feeds, right? So that's very close to what ZK Starks and Starknet is all about. They have that advantage that I haven't seen any other oracle doing something similar, so it makes sense to become a prominent player. The default, I don't know, we have discussed that it's always value to have multiple ways of doing the same thing, right? So, but yeah, no, certainly I'm a fan of the work they're doing.
Oh, great. Let's get into DeFi proper. Nils, this is where you stand out. We're looking at, of course, we've talked about the opportunity that comes in with Bitcoin. Are we looking at new innovations or design changes on your platform that will enable this Bitcoin integration to flourish?
So on the one hand, I think lending and lending markets are kind of a primitive, right? So they're like a basic infrastructure, if you want, for kind of a financial system, a decentralized financial system. And lending as a primitive is boring, kind of, if you want, right? You know, it's over-collateralized lending, right? Ultimately, there is a collateral asset and then there is a debt asset. There is not, on this primitive level, there is not any new concept, right? But where new features or things appear is on kind of the periphery to those primitives. One of the things that we've already pushed on Starknet is the ability to simply and easily get a multiplied exposure to an asset or a yield. And that is one of DeFi's, favorite strategies. And as we see more Bitcoin assets coming to Starknet, different flavors of Bitcoin assets, some will carry yield, others won't. We'll see more diversity in the type of strategies that are being offered or built around. And I think that is the level where we're supporting more things as kind of Bitcoin comes to Starknet. And then on the other hand, I just want to kind of link that back to the conversation around wallets that we had before. From our perspective, the users, they want to get a secure environment, of course, but also they want to get a good UX, right? That's when we say currently people are just, let's say, locking Bitcoin away and holding it. They're not using it. That's to a big part because there is not a good usability around using Bitcoin, actually. So a lot of kind of the efforts that I think Starknet as an ecosystem kind of we put work into are around unlocking, the best UX, and that's also something where we're very excited about collaborating with all those different players. And I think as we, have done with Argent, it will be really good to see similar kind of UX unlocks with Xverse as a wallet. So I'm really excited to, discuss those products with them, and I am really excited to see Jan also mentioning that that they're very open and interested in offering those integrations. And so I think that's really the level where we can add most value at the moment to offer the best UX to enter maybe the same old boring products, but for a new asset class, right?
Yeah, great. Do you see addressing security on this new, what would you say, movement as the same as Ethereum, or there are going to be tweaks in with your approach to security?
I think the biggest conversation there goes back to David and how we can actually scale Bitcoin. Is it like we currently do through, let's say, more traditional bridges, which offer, similar kind of security patterns than the existing ones? I think we will be able to gradually improve that, right, until to kind of this future point where Starknet might be kind of a native roll-up, right, settling on Bitcoin directly. That's, of course, the goal for everyone here. But when we discuss, I think, security unlocks here, I think we're mostly looking at this layer, right? On the lending market itself, right? There is not that much different things, whether it's kind of a Bitcoin asset or not. We always have to be very careful with how much liquidity is available on Starknet itself for efficient liquidations, because that ultimately protects everyone in a pool. We already are in touch with different teams who look at creating Bitcoin-focused pools, and they're similar to other areas. There are different flavors. There are different types of users. Some users are interested in, let's say, more risk-on pools where I have the chance to earn higher yield because my Bitcoin can also be borrowed by others. Others are more like, fully focused on security, so they want to have their Bitcoin isolated in that specific pool, so they are sure no one can actually borrow their Bitcoin and they will always be able to withdraw it again. So I think on that level we already see different flavors of lending markets to be built. I think the flexibility that we have with this infrastructure, lending infrastructure, really helps making and building all these different flavors of lending markets very easily.
Yeah. David, do you have anything to add in terms of security to the system?
The only comment is that I mentioned that I have multiple paths to this implementation. How this evolution will take place, I'm not really sure. Is it going to be like some kind of upgrade going from one to another? It's going to be like a different implementation, like one's going to die while the other one grows. I don't know. It's still very, very early to tell. But the good thing is that we have different paths, right? That we know that it's going to happen. We just don't know exactly how, maybe even when, but we know it's going to happen. And I know that Starknet really set on doing that in a very trustless and secure way, which is a hallmark of what Starknet is about, right? It's like it's the most secure because of the ZK and no trusted setup, and because people, when they come from Bitcoin, they're extremely mindful of security and self-custodial and decentralization. So that is a paramount importance to us as well.
Yeah, great. We've seen a lot of partnership with regards to this development recently. I mean, we've had Guardian Finance partnership mentioned. We've seen Lombard Finance recently just mentioned. Nils, can you walk us through what a lending activity on Vesu would look like from custody to staking and yield? What is it going to look like?
Okay, I can show you kind of the path, the final outcome that we want to see. Again, there probably are a number of steps here, but if we look at all those different layers or primitives in between, Bitcoin, let's say on Bitcoin itself, staking on Starknet, and then lending on Vesu, the optimal UX again, I think, is if a user can deposit Bitcoin from their Starknet accounts, from their Bitcoin account, on a Bitcoin wallet directly into this vault, into this strategy that earns them the yield. And then there are different paths, right? So one is different stacking, if you want, of different yields. So one element that has to happen is kind of the bridging aspect. We already see now with Bravos and their offering that you can actually deposit on Bitcoin and it will be bridged for you and supplied directly. So at some point, bridging has to happen. Then you have it on Starknet. And on Starknet, what you're excited about, then you will be able to actually secure Starknet with Bitcoin and the staking, to also have liquid staking Bitcoin on Starknet. So similar to XStark, you have something that's liquid but staked, secure Starknet, but also earn staking yield. But then you can use it for other things too, right? So you you stake it with a liquid staking provider. You get a receipt token. This earns you staking yield already. And then you supply this liquid staking token in a Vesu market where you can either directly earn more yield on that, or you can use it to borrow liquidity with which you can then earn more yield, or you can spend it with the Argent card or in whatever way you want, right? So there are these different layers here that you stack on top of each other depending on what your flavor is. And I just think, again, working on the best UX is what we should really focus on as an ecosystem.
Yeah, I think one of the key aspects of this from a user perspective is on yields. Are we going to get yields in native BTC, or we're looking at native tokens to come as yields? Either ways, if you're looking at BTC, native L1 BTCs, we're looking at something like a fractional reserve system to be able to make that happen. But what's the architecture you're looking at in terms of yield?
So for us, again, yield comes in many different flavors, right? Already now we have organic yield that accumulates in the asset that you deposit when others borrow your asset. So every block yield accrues in whatever asset you have deposited, right? That's one source of yield that accrues in the same asset than what you hold on Vesu, for instance. Then there are other layers of yield. We can maybe look at the XStark market to compare this a bit, assuming we have these liquid staking tokens for Bitcoin too on Starknet. So you have a staking yield on the underlying asset, right? Now for XStark, because it's Stark, it accumulates in the same asset too, in Stark, staking yield. There, I would probably, or we would have to ask David again how this would exactly look for Bitcoin staking in the future. But there is a second layer, kind of what we call an asset native yield, right, on the asset that you've deposited. And then there is a third layer that we already have on Starknet, and we'll also see in the future, which are rewards. Can be different types of rewards. We are, for instance, specifically around the Bitcoin push, onboarding other projects which will emit their own rewards on top of deposits in Vesu. So it can be different assets. And the question is just in the end, your offering that you want to offer to your users, for instance, as a wallet or an aggregator or whatever. Do you want to give the user an experience where they just see their balance go up? I think that's a very interesting offering for many Bitcoin holders. They're not so much interested in other rewards. And then you just compound whatever additional rewards have accumulated into the underlying asset. But again, I think it depends on the specific user you want to talk to, right?
Yeah, great. I think one thing this thing does for Starknet is this whole thing is going to expose Starknet to a whole lot of new users, both on Ethereum and both on Bitcoin. David, how do you see this playing a role in Starknet as a whole, bringing in users, bringing in developers? How do you think this is going to play out?
You mean for the dual settlement approach we're trying to take?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think first of all, to mention that this integration with Bitcoin is not that we're abandoning Ethereum, right? That integration is very much alive and well. We're going to keep, improving it as much as we can. Ethereum keeps being our home. It's just we're trying to connect this to the biggest networks, right, on Starknet, to bring this liquidity natively, because we have this native bridge as well for Ether right now that we can bridge back and forth between Ethereum and Starknet. We want to do the same thing with BTC, and that enables a lot of different use cases for DeFi, for payments, whatever. The dual settlement, I'm not sure exactly how this would work. I don't know if the whole of a Starknet transitions or operations will be settled on both with validity proof exactly the same. Maybe that's the goal, or maybe it's something that you can choose as a developer where do you want to settle. That's still, I think, a bit up in the air. Hard to tell right now. I think we're more early stages. Okay, how do we do this integration? And then we go figure out the details. But if we manage to have this full verification of a whole Starknet operation on both networks, I mean, it's a huge boom in security, right? But I'm not quite sure if that's exactly the goal. We have to wait a little bit to see the actual implementation coming from Starkware. Right now, we're trying to figure out the integration, which path to follow.
Oh, great.
Maybe to emphasize here, sorry, Uche, on the opportunity for Starknet, because we talked a lot about the opportunity for Bitcoin. So we said already, Bitcoin is a much bigger market than Ethereum, right? So that is an opportunity already. But also the Ethereum layer 2 ecosystem landscape is pretty competitive, right? So Starknet is today the most successful ZK rollup, but we are now competing also with optimistic rollups, which have been there for a longer time. So they benefit from this, first mover advantage. When we look at Optimism, Arbitrum, they have a huge distribution among, let's say, crypto native users. Then Base came a bit later, but Base has this great distribution among what I would call more, less crypto savvy users. And so it's very competitive. When we look at Bitcoin has today around 20 layer 2s, or, teams building layer 2s for Bitcoin. But it's still a very small market because it's still really the beginning. Everybody is still using these, multi-sig bridges. Everybody will move to BitVM at the same time. Starknet has all, these things around maybe Collider VM as well. If we can enable governance on Bitcoin, then Starknet is very well positioned as well. And so, Starknet has. It is the beginning of the race. Starknet has this great technology. Starknet already has an ecosystem, and so I think all in all, this is a great opportunity as well, right? This really shows that we are well positioned at the moment for to become probably one of the leading layer 2s on Bitcoin.
I just want to mention that it's something interesting might happen is that when I go to workshops, try to onboard people to use Cairo to build smart contracts. if you come in from Ethereum and say, oh, but I know Solidity, why would I learn something else? So it almost like a play against us to involve people. Like I have to learn a new language that is not Solidity. But I feel like trying to attract the Bitcoin crowd will be easier. The fact that it's not Solidity is something else, also closer to Rust. So in that case, we might have an easier time convincing them to actually try Cairo and build smart contracts because it's Cairo, it's something different.
Oh, great. Like I said, opportunity lies everywhere as far as this development is talked about. We're almost coming to the end of this, but I want, normally I'll say let's do a rapid session, but I figured this will be best fitted for this. I think it makes sense for everyone to go around. Give me the killer case for a Bitcoin integration to Starknet. What's the DeFi killer case for Bitcoin and how your platform will play a role in it? I think maybe Antoine, you go first.
No, I mean, so the whole idea will be to really simplify user experience. I think we are now on Starknet at a point where we can really bring this, Web2 experience with self-custody to people. So this will be the focus, and I think this is how we also win against other, competitors.
Oh, great. Matteo?
So I'm really excited to see all these new assets coming on Starknet. I think we'll be able to onboard them pretty quickly and have them as collateral on the multiple platforms and the multiple DeFi protocols on Starknet. So just have all these assets and provide real value to 1 billion users hopefully.
Okay. Yeah, I think you.
Well, yeah, I'm just explaining. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Go ahead.
So, I'm just extremely excited to see Starknet on Xverse, which is something that we're working on. And, at the end of the day, we just want to offer this super comprehensive experience where no matter if you're on the L1 or some of the L2s, like you are just, it's just seamless, it's easy to use. And I think the user experience has been mentioned here many times. Of course, that really matters. So, we are focused on it, but just in general, I'm just excited for any kind of innovation. I'm hoping that Starknet can attract some really killer builders, maybe from the Bitcoin ecosystem, as David mentioned, to build some new things. Maybe they don't even exist yet, because I think really Bitcoin doesn't have much. Let's be honest, right? Bitcoin really is kind of lacking behind in terms of the use cases compared to the other chains. We're kind of now rebuilding it and building it from scratch to some extent. And so I'm just excited to see more adoption across the board. So whatever it takes to bring more builders here, we're happy to support. And I'm just excited for this pie to grow substantially.
Great. Nils, yours?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty simple from our perspective. Start using your Bitcoin and not just lock it away. That means, earn yield on your Bitcoin, use it to borrow liquidity against it. And also for not just Bitcoin, but all the other, great Bitcoin ecosystem assets like runes and so on. And do all of that, with the best UX. We have the best wallet here, right? And at, Bitcoin security at some point in the future.
Yeah. David?
I'm more excited about something more fundamental, payments. I tell the story before, but I'm from Venezuela and I live in Canada. In 2017, Venezuela was going through hyperinflation. It was more than 1,000% inflation per year. And it became to the point that merchants in Venezuela started to accept crypto as payment because the currency stopped working as currency. And say, okay, well, that's cool. Actually, I can onboard my family and using crypto for payments. And I was trying to search which merchant accepted Lightning payments, right? Because that was the only alternative to pay with the low fees. None of them did. They accepted pretty much any other cryptocurrency except Lightning. The most popular was Dash. So I dream of a future where we can actually do payments with Bitcoin with very low fees and create this circular economy and just bypass all this craziness happening. And different countries like Venezuela, for example, right? That destroys the economy, destroys the wealth of the people. So payments, that's what I want to see. Finally, a better version of the Lightning Network working.
Oh, great, great. I think people are listening, and I think a lot of work will be put into this, and especially with the recent government adoption going around the world. I mean, USGC with the election of Donald Trump announced that the Bitcoin will also be part of their reserve. So I see a lot of opportunities coming as a consequence. Just before we wrap up, to be sure I got every point, if there's anything anybody would want to add on the conversation, I mean, the floor is open for anyone to.
Just want to mention and express again, very interested in building this with all of you here. Argent, Xverse, and of course Pragma, very important infrastructure, and bring the Bitcoiners on board.
Great, great. All right. So I hope we did justice to the Bitcoin specials conversation. And I just want to say that I'm happy that every one of you agreed to come on the show. It's such a pleasure, and I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Matteo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this. It was fun. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Nils. Thank you, Antoine. Thank you, Matteo. Thank you, David. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys, for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
What a fantastic session. I know you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so that others can watch and learn. Don't forget, I'm your humble host, Uche. See you next week.